I am good to go.
Yeah, I say go for it, bro.
Oh, cool. Well, good morning. I'm honored to be here and be a part of our conversation today. Um, I really respect this discourse that you all have set forth. I feel like there is a need for us to be really deliberate, not only in pushing boundaries in the material things that folks are pushing boundaries around access to certain spaces, physical spaces, access to certain material capital in our lives. I think that it's also increasingly important that we're pushing the internal boundaries of how we think about things, how we connect to the environment around us, and these things that my grandfather would used to tell me about in Norfolk, Virginia, how he would have to, when he was walking down the street as a young adult in his early 20s, in the late 40s, that he would have to step off the sidewalk if a 9-year-old white child was walking by. And so the idea of us being able to walk down the street um, and treated equally as we walk down the street was a radical idea that people, something we take for granted now, but that radical idea was pushed and materialized into the blessing of something that we don't even think about anymore. I think these conversations that you all are pushing and driving forward, and the times where they seem radical or other judgments are placed on them, even positive judgment values. Um, the goal being that there's a time where it's just a casual thing, and so I'm honored to be in a space and be contributing to that. And I've put together a presentation to share. When I was talking to the group facilitators here around, and do I have permission to share my screen? Are you okay with that? It's a thumbs up is good. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um, when we discussed what it was that I would be sharing, um, we talked about, and I was excited to share um, things around business and social enterprise. And when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I started to become very politicized. And me and the people that I was spending every day with, one of them is in the room in our conversation now, we were enthralled by any type of ideas or conversations that were about changing the socio-political position of our people. And most of that conversation was conversation around education, around culture, around environment, and almost no conversation around capital. I mean, we were, if anything, we were anti um, material, and it was not anything that we were thinking about. And I'm grateful for that experience because it devalued for me what otherwise me and my peers would have been encouraged to pursue in uh, our late teens and early 20s, was to be very mindful about how you're going to make a living, how you're going to, and for a long time, I was never asked questions about business or enterprise. With the advent, and I remember when it first started happening on college campuses, I would be given a presentation about the intersection of social justice and blah, 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 blah. And then a student would raise their hand and they would ask me about money. And I'm like, what is that? Because it's just something I never really talked about. I grew up in a working class family. We were for sure poor as I was growing up, and whatever wealth I generated in my life later was never a part of my conversations, or I was never asked to talk about it. But what it was is that young people could look up um, and get some speculation on my wealth. Um, I love seeing that, for example, in Switzerland, they're having conversations about, along with valuing the GDP, the gross domestic product, that they're putting a whole economic value on people's happiness and wellness, that be something that be at the forefront of the conversation. And I now find part of my deliverance to be to have conversations about why it's important that we are talking about sustaining ourselves socioeconomically, not materially. But I find it very common that men and women who, in their youth and in their young adulthood, start to engage in the love work of social justice, that our diets change, our vibrations towards how we treat people change, what we listen to changes, what we ingest mentally changes, but our relationship to being able to sustain ourselves in the world is undervalued. Therefore, there's a less focus on it, not due to lays, not due to any bad characteristic, but we just don't value it. And then I find good, solid people struggling materially in the world in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and gods in our community can't even afford to die. People who are responsible for legions in our community, for generations of building, when they pass away, their children have to do online campaigns for a $4,000 funeral. And those last moments in honoring our elders don't become about really reflecting on their lives, but figuring out a way to put something together financially that is also money that goes outside of our communities. My name is Lyfe. I am Chief Executive Officer of Lyfe Productives. I'm formerly Commissioner of Arts and Cultural Affairs for the City of Oakland. I am an instructor for the design school at Stanford University. I am a poet, an artist, blah, blah, blah. Before anything, I believe that all people deserve adequate food, shelter, and clothing. And all of my work is connected to that. When I think about folks creating a business that want to, I think it's really important to understand that the business that you create should be an organized expression of your spiritual self. So the reason we take issue with corporations, the reason that we take issues with businesses or individuals who are exploitive, is because what they're doing is they're stepping out into the universe, this is my personal belief, and they're presenting you with the organization of their spiritual self. So due to afflictions that they have spiritually, they are greedy, they are exploitive, they organize that in the form of the business and they throw it out in the universe. There is great debate in spiritual circles around whether or not the universe actually judges things as good or bad. There's an argument that Donald Trump, who for sure I am no supporter of, I do not believe in, I don't agree with, but God damn it, this might have been the biggest witnessing globally of someone manifesting power of mind. A laughable joke of a person obliterates 16 career Republicans. And then, and the whole time is just saying, I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna win. And they laughed at homie. And then, he didn't run up against some 4-year governor of Illinois who was a Democrat and defeat him. He ran against Hillary Clinton, a long stay of the Democratic Party, and became president of the United States. And then everything that the cat said he was going to try to do, he tried to do it. And everything that they threw at the cat, from collusion with foreign bad doers, things that they were accusing him of, he would go and he would face authority around, and then he would beat it. And while one thing that I can't ignore is, I don't know if the universe goes, you're bad and you're good, or is the universe cosmic reaction to our intention that whatever we put forth, it flourishes. And we grow up in communities, many of us, that say things like, man, the struggle continues. And that shit continues. We continue to struggle. Poor People's Conference. And all the poor people get together and convene on poverty. So to me, my humble encouragement is that whatever we value and whatever we want to put forth, that we organize it similar to the organizers of this convening, and put forth an intention that touches people way beyond what it is that you began doing. We are witnessing the maturation of the European. So when I talk about this Prime Minister of Switzerland, who has a campaign with Iceland and New Zealand to value happiness over money, they're like, wow, this is a great thing. When white people talk about yoga and not eating meat and not being violent, they call it New Age. But all the New Age for the European is the ancient afterthought of the African and the indigenous person. The things that the white world is just starting to pick up on, just starting to embrace, are things that indigenous and African people around the world have long been about and long been doing. And we all know what it's like when someone is talking to you and they condescend onto you. Like you're 33 years old and someone's like, how are you? What's going on? Oh, it's good to see you. And you go, yo, what's your problem? What is, they're talking to you like you're 7 and you turn the knob back to 33. Women in our communities know what it's like when a man is talking to you like a child or like you're subhuman. Our elders know what it's like, regardless of gender, when someone 50 years younger than you is like, how are you doing? They reduce you to an infant discourse when you're 70 years old, and you will correct them. How are you doing? You know, we assert ourselves. Whether it be good intention or bad intention, the European world is coming into this awareness that we have long had, and they're talking to us as if we are not the elders of the world. And they are placing on us this narrative that is assumptive that their first day in a new way of being is our first day. And we even are doing that. And part of that will be reflected in the presentation. The other thing that happens that I feel for our white brothers and sisters when there's this thin veil or lens that they look through at themselves, is that even Europeans have digressed from formal practices in their history and in their traditions that were more holistic, and they even demean their own reality when they act like this is some new thing or new way of being. My message from when I was 18 or 19 years old of Black power, of social justice, of combating white supremacy, of spiritual and educational enlightenment has never shifted. And our work has been to take that discourse into spaces that have broader implications, and critique them. And also a big power tool that we have is often I'm offered capital by these institutions and we reject it. So we're there to contribute into the space, contribute a perspective of power and love without always requiring a financial payment and associated with that. And it allows us to not be bought in the space. And I encourage you to find opportunities where you can go and contribute in broader spaces. And when you can, don't take the capital, take the space. And this turns later into opportunities to build in more whole ways. My firm is a product development firm, and we're invested in making ideas that are positive and programs that are great for people irresistible. And so we develop campaigns, products, and programs for a slew of different entities. Recently, for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, there's a high discrepancy in Black and Brown people dying from car crashes. And there's a redesign of sidewalks to make them safer for cyclists and pedestrians. And at the onset, it was broadly, inadvertently, and institutionally racist. So our firm comes in and redesigns everything from the hiring structure to the outreach structure to the physical structure of those corridors to make sure that they're inclusive for all folks. That's one example of something that we built with the National Fair Housing Alliance. We've done work to prove that housing is a human right, but make that argument provocative and interesting and irresistible. This is a photo of our staff in front of our Burbank office. And I'm really proud of our team and our crew and its diversity in generational diversity, racial diversity, gender and orientation diversity, but also diversity of thought, that folks are on very different spectrums about how they view and see the world. My mother talks about how when I was born, I didn't cry. I just looked around like I was disappointed. And it's true that I think my lens has always, this is me at maybe 1.5 with my big mama. And it's true that my perspective has always been kind of critical, you know, in a loving way. I don't think any of us desire to have a headstone when our day comes that says, here rests a person who fought, debated, and argued their entire life. Or here rests a person who spent their entire lives brilliantly reacting to the prejudice waged on them by strangers. Or to have your headstone say, here rests a person who spent their entire lives brilliantly reacting to the prejudice waged on them by strangers. And for sure, we don't want to say, here rests an entire people, an entire generation defined by their oppression, known for their resistance. And that's what's at stake right now with the current generation. That's synonymous with our skin tones and our bodies. It's affliction, reaction, and you know more about what we were defending against than what we were building. And I think that's cause for great alarm. That if we're not careful, our proudest moments will be reacting to and doing nuanced recreations of our poverty on a global stage. We are not the things America has done to us. We are not oppression. Slavery, segregation, police brutality, and racism are not Black history. Surviving slavery, segregation, and police brutality and racism is our history. That what has been afflicted upon us is not who we are. This is me at 17 years old. I did not care about or know about tenets of social justice. Really, I was just beginning to learn about that. I was outright from East Oakland. I wasn't a bad kid or a hard kid. I was a good cat. But everything that I have in my life, the peace that I have in my life, anything material I have in my life, the purpose I have in my life, comes from a socio-political education. And people who saw me as a worthwhile young person to be given new information. And I want to refresh and encourage all of us that even when it seems discouraging, when we look at the apathy in our communities and on our young people, that a seed planted in any of us can flourish. And I'm so grateful for that. And as we move, walking mindfully today through what I'm going to share and reflecting on it internally, I'm reminded that it all began with just a seed that was planted in me. And that's the greatest opportunity that we have as we move. I want everyone to think of any number between 1 and 10. Don't tell me what it is. Think of any number. Now, do something crazy. It doesn't matter. Add 3 to that number. Cool. You got it? Cool. Um, Now do something crazy. It doesn't matter. Add 2 to that number. Cool. Do something crazy now. It doesn't matter. I don't know. Subtract the first number you picked. Cool. Good. No, it's still a little early. Okay, cool. What do you want to do next? Somebody give me a symbol. Do you want to add or subtract next? Cool. I see someone said add, add 2. Now think really hard the number you have left over. I'm joining you there. 7. Raise your hand if you have 7 left over. Cool. How is that possible? How from I'm 300 miles away from where you are. How is that possible? I'll walk through it. I asked you to pick a number. That's you. That's a non-gender specific stick figure. That's you. And then I told you to add 3 after you picked the number. And then I told you to add 2. And then I said subtract the first number you picked, which effectively meant remove yourself from the situation. So now I know the whole room is holding 5. All you have left over is what I gave you. Then the bullshit starts, the hustling, the illusion of choice. Do you want to add or subtract? Now I knew you were going to say add, brother, because earlier and adding is easier. So I knew you were going to say add. And so add 2. 3 plus 2 plus 2 is 7. This is a mathematical poem to say that if I remove you from a situation, I can make you whatever I want to make you. That if I label you or remove you from your own trajectory as it relates to every elemental aspect of your life, then I can insert an illusion of choice and make you who I want to make you. So those of us who find ourselves struggling in the material world, or we have business or venture that we want to develop, oftentimes the hindrance is not our creativity, it's not our relationship to money, it's not whether or not we believe in capitalism or not. I don't. Some people do. Some people closetly do and think they don't. But whatever those things are, really what it is that someone else has defined the reality that we move through the material. And so the first step in building enterprise in your life, I believe, is to be radical enough to create for yourself what it's going to look like. And have ideas. There's ideas among us right now that no one just 15 years ago would have said. If 15 years ago you said, you're going to walk down the street and people are going to be holding up their phone and looking at themselves once a day? No, maybe like 9 times a day. No way. It doesn't make any sense. But someone has these ideas and technologies that they build out, and then other people are accepting them in the world. We are an undeniable and beautiful people. I'm a professor, and before I was working in universities, as I was coming up as an educator, I would work in a lot of inner city schools. And your day starts off with a roll sheet. And one day I see this name on a roll sheet, and I'm trying to read it. I go, look, Lachey, little sister raised her hand here. I was like, oh, Okay, that's interesting. It's cool. So years later, I'm at Target, and when she was my student, Lachey was probably 11. So I'm at Target, maybe she's 16 years old. I hear Mr. Ice. And I turn around and she comes running. She jumps. She gives me a big old hug. I give her a hug. I say, hey, it's good to see you. And her mom is there. She introduces me to her mom and we're talking. Her mom goes, yeah, I remember you. And I said, okay, well, I got to get going. Lachey, it's good to see you. Her mom said, what'd you call my baby? I said, Lachey. She said, her name is Ladasha. I said, God damn, what's your son's name? Topostrophe? You know, like the, but our people, we are experienced in naming, like in recreating how we declare our children out in the world. My mother named me Isaac. I'm like, no, I'm Ice. You know, so the same thing can happen with the businesses and the things that we build in the world, that just like Ladasha or Topostrophe, that we can create who we are and where we are and how we exist in the world. Frantz Fanon teaches that each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Effectively saying that out of the blue, each generation has to figure out what is the issue of this generation. What do we need to do? And how do we deliver on that calling? And I always encourage all of us, if you get the opportunity, to look up what was going on in the world the day you were born. Talk to your elders, what was going on in your family when you were born. And I believe spiritually that that is a clue to why we are delivered into this realm. That what do these people need? I don't believe personally that spirits have a race or a gender. That's my personal belief. So I look at the back of my black hand and go, well, why was I created in these people? What do these people need? White folks should go, whoa, what do white people need right now in this time? What do they need to be thinking about? As we reflect on the environments that we were born into, what does this environment need and how do we contribute to that? And I believe also those of us that are interested in creating businesses and some level of wealth in our life that you desire, whatever that is, that it's also the same question. What does this generation need created in business and enterprise? What are the problems that need to be solved? Business is the art of efficiency. If we are efficient, we prosper in venture. Politics, on the other hand, is the art of negotiation. So Black people and brown people, we suffer because we have nothing to negotiate on the political sphere other than our humanity, which is obvious they don't care about, how wrong we were done, the past, and our culture. Well, you can't negotiate that on a political sphere. So we see communities that we are allies with that because they have real social capital and real social power, when there is something that they're trying to change in society, they're able to negotiate tangible things. 2 nuclear warheads were dropped on Japan when my grandmother was in the 3rd grade. Japan was flat. 2 nuclear bombs have been dropped on them. Don't forget this, they fought with Hitler. They couldn't have been in a worse socio-political system. They're blocked off from the rest of the world. The first thing they do is they begin sewing textiles. That's all they could do. They leverage those relationships to get into the steel industry. There's no natural ore in Japan, but in the 80s, they were the #1 producer of steel. In the 70s and the 80s. Well, what do you make out of steel? Toyota, Yamaha, Mitsubishi. And by the time I'm in the 3rd grade, they're a world power. Clearly hated by imperialist powers, 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on them. Clearly hated in America. They were in Oakland, in communities where we're all from. They took Japanese people out on the street and put a tag on them. But sociopolitically, there's something to negotiate. And we have to make choices as individuals and communities whether we want to get into that game, whether we want to have things that we can negotiate with power beyond sentiment. Black folks participated in the greatest migration in American history, where between 1946 and 1972, we left the South. 10 million Black people go and change the face of America. Before 1946, very, very, very few population of Black people above the Dixie line. And it's important that we learn in universities, we're taught about our people in charge, but I want to take a moment to really look at this. That we performed one of the biggest acts of resistance. We just got up and left. After 400 years on one side of the line, we got up and we left. Isabel of Wilson wrote an incredible book called Warmth of Other Suns that addresses this. This is not just something that Black people did. A generation before, white folks moving out and trying to get out of poverty from the Industrial Revolution in this country followed the railroad tracks west. And these photos are from that time. That it's a human condition, a thing that we do as humans, where we get up and we move and we seek a way to do for ourselves, to benefit for ourselves. And often there has been a corporate entity to exploit that desire to do for ourselves by turning the track so that we do for them under the guise of it being doing for ourselves. The next phase in that human stride is for us to actually do for ourselves. I want to show you two images from our Raza brothers and sisters experience. Hundreds of thousands of workers, many of whom were experienced farm laborers, were brought by train from Mexico's interior to the border. Many impoverished Mexicans stopped working their farms to follow the dream of earning vast amounts of money in the fields of American Southwest, particularly in Texas and California. This photo is from 1942. And while white men who were farm workers were all fighting in the war during World War II, the beginning of an influx, even before American involvement in the war, begins. And this is the clean way that the American media talked about the experience of Mexican workers who were brought in for this opportunity. This is the reality. Upon arrival to the United States, braceros, as they were called, were taken to processing centers where they were searched for vegetables, weapons, marijuana, or similar contraband and sprayed with DDT by the Department of Agriculture, like cattle. But again, the condition was based on two things, in my opinion. One, the need for another entity to provide a way. And also, sometimes a light shines and we move towards that light. So if you've been to Mexico, a beautiful country, similar to Japan, beautiful country, two different mind states, Japan and Mexico. In Japan, the mind state was close the doors, we're gonna build something for ourselves. I have a rough 50 years, but after that, you can kiss our ass. In Mexico, people leave a beautiful country because of all the problems that are created there and may end up in America selling oranges on the side of the freeway and dealing with a whole bunch of other indignities along the way. And in our personal life, I have found personally great value in staring down the monster of fear that makes us feel like, well, I gotta step outside of my purpose to create something for myself. But then the other thing is to become just critical of money and resource and taking care of yourself. But there's that divine middle ground where you know, just like that illusion of choice I gave you with adding or subtracting, that you can eradicate that and you can sit in your own purpose and find something that allows you to flourish in life and answer whatever that calling is as you see it. Maria Moreno, one of the first women to join the UFW, Our Filipino brothers and sisters work the fields in California similarly. But with us, we didn't just bring our labor bodies. We brought our soul and our culture forward. And I love seeing this because the first thing we did is we hit and we brought the jazz everywhere. And I can tell you now, I walk in spaces, big corporate spaces. My firm has an 8-figure valuation. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder. So you can do math and make assumptions about what that probably means. And I walk in spaces and there's, it just kind of smells like lettuce in there. It's boring, We all have things that we can contribute, right? So one thing, a critique I always have for my of color brothers and sisters is we are kings and queens of the improvisation, right? That's what jazz is. If you watch people freestyle in a cipher, if you watch a sister bouncing a basketball between her legs and then doing a layup, and because we know we just have a rhythmic clock, we wing it because you get through life winging it based on this great asset we have to move. Cultures that have less of that, automatically, they create structure and time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. No African created the metronome. No way. There's a need for 1, 2, 7 schedule. Be here at this time. We vote on this day. That's it. They make up for the lack of with order. They overcompensate. These structures that dominate and crush people's spirit, no matter what their race is due to an overcompensation by people who lack rhythm. But we undercompensate because we have the rhythm. So you may have the most beautiful idea and you're trying to figure out, why doesn't this work? It's so soulful, it's so great, I'm moving, because you're not, nature has a structure. Nothing is more hilarious and ironic to hear a person who loves nature, bro, being against structure and order. The whole damn nature has an order and a structure. We recognize it. When it's 110 degrees where I'm at, I'm like, whoo, well, that's nature, that's that structure. It's that time of year. If it's November and it's 110 degrees, I'm like, whoa, what's happening? Something's out of order. You cannot love nature, not see the beautiful order and mathematics in nature. You can't claim to love nature and then resent order in your own life. Your nature calls for order. And it's important. We create the jazz. This is from a literary reading group circle in 1949. We bring our intellect to Chicago. The next generation bugs out. And I believe this desire was always there, but it just, look at the difference. These are her children. And it's wild and it's expressive and we're out of the canon. And think about what this took. Right now, you can go in some department store and find some of this. They making those clothes. They're putting that together. Can you all see my cursor moving on the screen here? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Can you see my cursor moving on the screen here? Or no? You can. Good. Let's deal with this. Look at this brother's eyeshadow. Look at these sunglasses. I think there's a piece of foil connected to this. This is some supersonic, futuristic build out. Also, look at the togetherness. Look at how this brother right here looks like he could be from North Berkeley today. The grandchildren of this generation create this. Look at this brother. We created Prince. We created Michael. We created hip hop. And while all these things are being created naturally off of how we are and how we move forward, great industry is being created around them. Prince takes great angst towards the business structure that's created around him. Hip hop takes great angst at the business structure that's created around him, but both Prince and hip hop dependent on that structure. Those of you who have children, you know how hilarious it is when your kids start bucking up against you, taking issues with you, critical of you, but they still need your fucking house to sleep in. That's us. Major issue with systems, but dependent on. And that's a deep, painful thing for us to move through beautifully and figure out how we'll move through. We created and kept our togetherness. We went to outer space. This sister went to Stanford when she was 16. This brother literally flew. We created Beyonce. Look at her name, back to the Ladasha name, Beyonce. That's made up. You were born. I encourage us all, if you're blessed, to have people who were around to really talk to you about it. And if you think so, for example, if when you were 18, you asked your mother about what it was like when you were born, and she told you, she's telling you that through her wisdom, maybe at 40 years old, when you asked her when you were 18. Well, now if it's 20 years later and your mama is 60, ask her again. Because we live in a peculiar time, man. Absolutely peculiar. And I have to address it through the lens of talking about business. So first of all, somehow our oppression has been totally branded. Nike puts out, for once, don't do it. They got kids right now chained to a wall in Malaysia. We must dismantle white supremacy on the label for Ben and Jerry's, #1 killer of Black people, heart disease. We will not be silent. This is a cotton company. Now, you know, sometimes you just stay out of something because you know it's a little touchy. A cotton company. We're an Australian brand made up of a proud family of diverse voices, ethnicities, and cultures. What's the state of the Aboriginal people in Australia? So those of us who have real social justice tendencies that are staying out of spaces of business because you got some hang up about making money or whatever, they're fraudulently stepping into the voids that we're not filling. We have to stop the exotification of Black poverty. That they are exotifying our poverty. One thing I hear a lot on university camp, I'll be in a class teaching, and some student over here says something that a student over here disagrees with, and the student that disagrees goes, "I can't," and they walk out of the class. Well, let me tell you what you can do. You can still be charged for this class. And also, we're so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. The ancestors that we lift up and put posters on our walls of and get tattoos and put in rap songs and poems, they dealt with a lot worse than just a little disagreement with someone in a class. I disagree with positions on campuses where there'll be someone who's like a known racist and they want to come speak on the campus and the kids protest them. No. One thing I learned from Congressman Ron Dellums, he told me, he said, I didn't need to put someone else down unless my argument was not legitimate. The university and educational forums are great spaces for discourse. The other thing that happens is, imagine you're a soon-to-be white supremacist, and you're 22 years old, and you think you're a white supremacist, but really you're just angry because you never knew your dad and you grew up poor in King County, California, or in Kern County, and you go to Cal State San Bernardino, you're studying communications and you're being recruited by this white supremacist organization, and you think you're going to go for it. And then you go to a campus, and instead of seeing Cornell West on a panel with me and 4 other people who agree with each other, so it's just this pontification session of agreement, the university does something really provocative. Cornell West and the Grand Wizard of the Bakersfield Ku Klux Klan in a conversation. And as this soon-to-be white supremacist, you're watching this and you're listening to the way this Grand Wizard is talking. You're like, wait a minute, I don't want to be like that. You're seeing what people are saying in the audience, and you're like, yo, I don't believe in that. And you start to listen to stories and ideas, and suddenly you're like, whoa, I need to find something different. And in our need to be to be around people who think just like us, to be surrounded by under the guise of diversity, really no diversity. Everyone's the same. Everyone's thinking the same. They have the same ideas. They come from the same perspective. We don't generate the real discourse that moves conversations forward. If you're from the Bay Area in the 60s, there's a gathering of a whole bunch of different movements in close proximity with one another, who disagreed on some things, agreed on other things, but they all got in the mix. So what's happening now is conversations about social justice and evolution of the human experience is separate from conversations about business. It's separate. Look at the people who run this country. Look at Congress, look at your senators. All business people and lawyers. No scientists, no artists. So when you're having a political conversation about art, you're effectively having a 3rd grade conversation. When you're talking about money, it's a layered, top tier, Harvard level conversation about money. But when you're talking about social justice, these people are 8 years old functionally when it comes to this thing, because we're not joining those forums, nor are we inviting them into our forums. We all have these ideas about people and the way they are. And I remember my mom, I was in the car with her. I love you, Mom. I'm in the car with her. I'm probably 11, and a guy in a Mercedes cuts us off. And my mom starts talking about how people who have cars like that, they feel like they can drive however they want to drive and cut people off. And they think that they're better than us. And being a credulous child, I believe that. Like, man, if someone's in a Mercedes, they not only will they cut you off, but they're horrible people. And my mom probably didn't realize how much I was really absorbing that she was saying. And of course, there's people on this thread. You might drive an Altima and you're the king or queen of cutting people off. Or inconsideration can come from anywhere, just like compassion can come from anywhere. And we have to evolve our way I believe, of seeing and our perception of wealth and business and where we belong. And I think if you start thinking about where you feel like you belong and where are places that you don't belong, often subconsciously and consciously, we feel like we belong in places of struggle and scarcity and abundance. That's for those other people. And they name calling us and we're name calling them. And they know nothing about us and we know nothing about them. And we're not actually engaging in resolving our condition. Instead, we have become master pontificators of our condition. Imagine I'm in a fight and someone slaps me. Instead of learning to defend myself from the slap, they slap me. And I start this analysis of you. I'm getting a degree in getting slapped. I have a PhD in slapology. The way that hand came down on my face really made, it's ridiculous. The domestic and international business world intends on handing Black people a broom. My car, I get in my car, push a button, and to work. They're building, Nas says, we play with PlayStations. They building space stations on Mars, plotting civilizations. When I'm in East Africa, the Chinese are coming. They give bring 40 architects, 30 engineers, 100 comfort women. They bring all this technology and they give the Kenyan a broom. In university campuses, if I see a Black or brown person running around, they're the dean of diversity at a school that's not diverse. If our children are getting degrees in Black studies, we have failed. How is your ass Black for 18 years and you learn is Black for the first time when you're 18? And then you pay a university $150,000 that took your Black assness from you in the first place to give it back to you, kind of. That's ridiculous. No self-respecting Korean says, I'm getting a degree in Korean studies. They already know they're Korean. They know that they're Korean. And yes, we deal with voids in our community where, yeah, we got to learn that. We have to learn who we are. But when I hear about an ethnic studies department at SF State being founded, I think in '68, and we still new to the conversation, that's something that we have to deal with. And let us not be here resting entire people and entire generation defined by our oppression and known for our resistance. Instead, it should be, here we have a generation, a beautiful Black generation, whom on the shoulders of greatness built solutions, institutions, and tangible things that brought joy and peace to their people. If you are not Black, here is a generation that lifted up a beautiful, formerly marginalized generation, whom on the shoulders of my legacy and allyship built solutions, institutions, and tangible things that brought joy and peace to their people. For our white brothers and sisters, your legacy cannot be, I agreed that Black people had it bad. Oh my God. And for the record, it's not a Trump supporter gentrifying my neighborhood. It's people with those signs in the yard, here, Black Lives Matter and science is real and no gender is hated. That's who's taking your neighborhood. It's not a Trump supporter in Omaha. Your white mayor in Oakland is letting murals be painted all over the city of Black people who can't afford to live there anymore. Our analysis has to be superior and not infantile and sentimental. What will you build? For me, it's a business and an enterprise. That you walk in and there's a Black CEO, and here's a Latino gay man as our transportation developer, and here's our facilities manager, and who are two really dope white people who get it and are fighting on the issues in the same way. And we don't talk about that. We talk about the work that we're building. What will we build? This is the common psyche and psychology, the way that people see Black people and how Black people see ourselves commonly. But we are undeniable and beautiful people. We are not our oppression. We are not police brutality. We are not to blame. And we are not with death and murder. Because the popular conversation of the day is about police, I want to talk about it in connection with business. The role of the police in America and the relationship to Black and poor people in America. I'm going to move through this pretty rapidly for time's sake. This is the normal way that we kind of see police marketed and if you're not from the Bay, it's really interesting because we have a whole different reality of what we get taught typically and brought up. But there's, people that are there to help, commonly, even in these really old images, the helper, on TV, they're either funny or, provocative. As a kid, and even now, every once in a while in a hotel, I'm watching Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show. This dude is hilarious. He's like really, really funny, when we were kids, they came out with RoboCop, so they took it to another level. the robotic cop, they did it again with RoboCop 2. Recently, they did it. Crime has a new enemy, and this really sick idea around who's the enemy of crime, who's the person that's on the right side of crime. There's this laughable kind of sexualization of police often, but you'll see on the side of any police car, protect and serve. The National Police Creed deals with protect and serve the wealth of the people. To protect and serve the wealth of the people is to protect and serve the property and the people who have property. So what is the relationship to the police if you don't own property? If, for example, if you're from Oakland, where I'm from, the police station is in the hood. You call the police, they don't come, and take 3 hours. In the hills, in the Skyline Hills, you call the police, no police station, like they live in the trees, they just fall out. Because the people there own the property and own the land. In America, the police are the janitors of capitalism. A big part of that job requires abuse and control over the people that do not have wealth and power. So for our work with Prosperity Now, we found that though Black Americans attend universities, own businesses, contribute greatly to the consumer economy, vote and serve in politics, serve in the military, and are important to the workforce, we own only 3% of the nation's wealth. So again, so what? They killed you in the street on videotape. So what? You want a voting right? I'm doing a project right now with Cal State, Monterey Bay. The entire university, 2 hours from Oakland, is about to enroll 60 Black students, 60. UC Berkeley, 30,000 students, 3% Black. 40 brothers on the football team, 10 sisters run track, 4 weird brothers play lacrosse. That's the whole damn, that's everyone. There's the void of, but we lack this power to negotiate. And the job description of the police as janitors of capitalism is to enforce that. When Barack Obama was elected president, I started getting all of these text messages that was like, they wouldn't give us 40 acres and a mule, so we'll take 50 states in the White House. We have overcome, it was bad. And what I ached around was how excited we were and how we were about to really learn that Santa Claus wasn't real. And what also was not celebrated enough, I believe, is more than it said something about how far Black people had come. It said a lot about how far white people had came. Black people, 11 to 14% of the population in the country, not all old enough to vote, don't all vote, highly levels of incarceration and felony parolees couldn't vote at the time. So Barack Obama was not elected by Black people. Barack Obama was elected largely by white people who just one generation before, this was the spiritual state. That's deep. That's really deep about what we've witnessed as a spiritual and energetic change and a shift in a people. Look at this. I saw this. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's the same dude. It's the same guy. It's not the same guy. I just like saying that. It's funny. It's not the same guy. And so the shift started and then it changes again. And there's this moment in this country. I personally don't align the state of the people, the state of the human race with American electoral politics. Personally, I don't. But it's a great general scale that we can look at that most people are familiar with. And the divisiveness in the country that came from this moment and the fallout, but those of us that have been involved in social justice discourse for the last 20, 30, 40 years, it's been a trip to see things that we've been talking about, wrestled with on a global scale, and talked about like this new thing. So now we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is we have to tolerate infantile thinking, not because people are less than us or that we're better than, but we're just more practiced in it. There's some of us that are so blessed to have, even if it's just been for the last 15 years, to be so versed in conversations about inclusion and equity that when you hear people talking about, kind of like adorable notions, that you can listen humbly and advance that forward. I think that's a great opportunity, but it's also an opportunity for us to create businesses and enterprises that do the same, because again, it's getting peculiar. And I want us to all think about, again, the year that we were born in. But I have a question about your second birth. So what was going on when you were physically born? But if you're in this form, there's likely a time in your life where you also went through another type of transformation. That you evolved and transformed into something that may even be unrecognizable to your former self. And how do a question that's valid to negotiate in these times around these things, or how do we embrace that change, and how do we create structures and dynamics that are meaningful for us, and how do we, if we choose to create businesses that not only serve other people but flow with our own personal transformation as we're moving through. I wish we had more time, but I want to create time for us to have an open conversation. So I'm going to pause here, and I've also shared with the facilitators here a tangible tool around the system of maintaining excellence, which is a physical document that you'll be able to fill out and kind of work through some of like your potential business ideas or things that you want to do that are all informed by the socio-political and spiritual tenets that I've shared today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do you have particular questions for us, or just kind of in general, anything that came up?
Well, I was wondering if anyone had any questions, I would answer them, or comments, or I can just join the discourse if that's okay. But no pressure to have a discourse.
Thank you very much. This was amazing.
Well, thank you, Mona Lisa.
And I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I ran into Michael Foster.
Oh, cool.
Rajali.
Cool, that's great.
Poll work. We're both going to be poll workers. Talk
Good.
about politics. But yeah, it was good to talk with him.
Good, and it's good to see you.
Yeah. So I want to know when and how did you go from not even thinking about capitalism or business type stuff, from power to
To this.
going into business
Well,
world.
I appreciate that question. So when at the same time that I was getting out of high school and that we had started Power, which is a reference to a social justice and cultural organization that I was a co-founder and a part of with many people, I had gotten a job at Def Jam at this big record label. And we were like, the idea was like I was at the label and that we were using the resources from what I was doing there to later fund like our Urban Living Summer Institute and all the stuff that we were doing. But I quit at Def Jam for ethical reasons. It was just way outside of the politic that was being bred in me. I quit and came home. And this is in the middle. Amani has shared pictures with me of like us being at these big protests and stuff. We were protesting the war in Iraq, and I'm going to every meeting, and the meetings were nauseating. They were angry. They were boring. They weren't the intention was beautiful. But I was at Def Jam. There was a club, I think I might have shared this with some of the facilitators. There was a club in Chicago. They had a night called the Dookie. And it was a big party night in the town. And they passed out these passes around town that you scratched and you smelled them and they smelled like Dookie. And it was so disgusting, but everyone was talking about the party because of it. Or in Utah, Ja Rule, he was passing out, his team was passing out these tattoos where all these white kids in Utah could put on water tattoos and have all of his tattoos. And they had all these provocative ways of pushing these ideas. The malt liquor companies, forget about it. They were brilliantly, darkly marketing poison to communities. We used to talk about this in our presentations with Power. The Tecate malt liquor has the Welga bird from the United Farm Workers Movement on it. There's a malt liquor poison called 211. 211 is the police code for robbery, and it says steal across the top of the can. It was, and I thought, man, we need to figure out a way to leverage this same type of thoughtfulness towards something positive. And at Def Jam, I had started Ice Life Productions to take a bigger take on the deals that I was doing there. And that transformed into Life Productives. And even with the group that you're referencing, when we would do events in the last years of that togetherness, often Life Productives would be a producer of one of those events or those concerts. And it was me just putting up the little capital that was needed to do those kind of things. And as I went out into the world, that became an asset that I had, that I was able to use. And so I would be invited to conversations. Ice, we'd like to have you be a part of this. And instead of it becoming about me, it was a part of me and the team that I was growing in our company. I learned the value of a play that I wrote as an asset, a curriculum that I developed as an asset. And these things I was able to leverage and find myself always in conversations with a diverse type of mentor that was able to help me navigate. And then it wasn't expected. I remember when I just realized, it's like, yo, this is what I do, and it just became successful on accident. Like most young punks, whatever we do that happens to us positively or negatively, a lot of times it's just accidentally, it happens, but you start to care for it. And inevitably it gets threatened. So for me in business, that was a thing too that I experienced, where you go through a shaky time in business. And if you really care about it, like any other movement, you defend it and figure out a way to rebuild it. And I'm just really humbled and grateful that it flourished and worked for me. And I think my desire to share it is, I don't think that there's anything special about me. That I know people way more smarter than me, people way more creative than me, particularly in social justice structures, that should and could have even more success in what it is they build or do.
You spoke to kind of the power of the stories that we have for ourselves and the ways that that kind of guides us in what we create, what we experience, where we find, where we feel comfortable. And you gave us your, I know a lot of this is part of that, but I'm curious if you have particular kind of stories or orientations that have helped you kind of arrive at the next level and continue to kind of disrupt the inertia of having the broom and actually
Yeah.
claiming something different for yourself and for us.
There's another thing for me is I'm a student of the Buddha, and more than like direct Buddhism, I really appreciate and learn from the folklore that comes with Buddhism. And one of my favorite wisdoms and stories is about a student who he's always complaining to his spiritual master. He's always saying, "Oh, I don't have enough. I don't have any friends. I didn't get the breaks that other people have." And she listens to him patiently. But one day she gets a little tired of it and she says, "I want you to go find a pound of salt." And he was confused on why, but he respected his master. So he went to go find a pound of salt. And when he came back, she had a glass of water on the table. And she said, "I want you to take a fistful of that salt and put it in the water." And so he does. He takes a fistful of the salt, puts it in the water. And she goes, "Now drink the water." He's like, "What?" But he respects his spiritual master. So he takes the glass and he drinks it. And she says, "How's it taste?" And of course, it's bitter, it's nasty, you know. And he goes, it's salty, it's nasty." She says, "Come with me and bring the salt." And they go for a walk, and he continues to talk about his problems and even now how his mouth is aching from the salt water that he drank. And they come upon a lake, and she says, "Take a fistful of salt and throw it in the lake." And he thinks that's odd, but he throws it in the lake. And she goes, "Now drink from the lake." And he drinks from the lake. And she goes, "How does it taste?" And he goes, "It tastes like the lake." She says, "Be the lake." That it's the same fistful of pain, it's the same salt, but with a broader lake, a broader perspective. It just dissolves it. You don't even experience it. And that's the value for me of like community. When I was called and asked to participate in this, I understand that's the lake. That's how we build. That's how we grow, by having those spaces, by broadening our perspective, you know. And I think that's what helps me just kind of stay, you know, out of it, you know. And it's not always easy. And sometimes, you know, you just want to do something else, you know. And part of it is remembering, like, yeah, I can be the curator of my life. I don't have to do that. I can do this. You know, there's also a consequence. You know, one thing that I didn't go to college and I didn't go get a bunch of jobs. So there was times where it's like, yeah, it's getting tight. And I'm not going to blame or hold my circle accountable for the fact that I wanted to write poems. You know, that's a decision I made. And standing in the faith of that decision, and really being in it, because the world will ridicule you. You know, the world, the people around us, the environment, the condition, it will scrutinize you on the path of becoming what you want to become. You know, when I first met with the facilitators of this forum, at least one of them had on like a unicorn onesie or something at one point, you know, and he's manifesting this great thing, you know, in a damn unicorn suit, you know. And some people are gonna go, "Hey, what's up with you? What's going on there?" But standing in that beauty allows you to get to the point where you're here, you know. Our our differences, our quarrels with one another, our quarrels with ourselves are never bigger than the outcome if we stick to it. Never. And that's what helps me.
I'm curious about the impacts of like, I like that story of the like salt in the cup and the
Mhm.
salt in the lake.
Mhm.
And I'm curious about like things that folks hold as trauma. Like there's the like complaints like this shit ain't working for me. And then there's the things like it's like I can't function. Like the you know how so many of us are so impacted by this place.
Mhm.
And I have curiosity about like when we are in these processes, how do you work with trauma? How do you what what advice do you give for folks who are dealing with like deep PTSD or
Mhm.
as they're trying to build and trying to become?
For me, I believe that the being is always well. And I find great wisdom in being the observer of what I'm feeling versus feeling it, you know. Um, if for on a lighter example, my being never has a cold, you know. And not only that, when I'm sneezing or coughing, I'm not sick. I'm healthy, and my body is rejecting what's not good in it. If I'm crying, it's not because I'm sad. I'm emotionally healthy enough to have a physiological reaction to that emotion. It is a signature of my health, not me not doing well. And when we pathologize a momentary condition, there are people who have depression, but there are also people who feel depressed and call it depression. They identify, I have, it's in me. You don't hear people say, I am COVID-19, but you hear people say, I am depressed. And now, and part of the medication industry, there's ribbons and badges for being ill, and versus really combating and stepping into being better. And so for me, the first thing is I try to really be patient with that. I also am mindful that sometimes you need a break. And sometimes that break might be a 3-year break. You might need to not be productive for three. A lot of times it's not what you're dealing with, it's that you never succumb. And in this country, there's a challenge to keep doing, keep pushing, keep creating, it's not, some of it's mental, some of it is environmental, a lot of it is like familial. We have to create chosen and biological families that give space for that incubation. We only, in our families, we only accept it, and in our relationships, we only accept it when it's a broken leg, cancer, uh, sometimes fatigue, sometimes then we're like, okay, that person needs to be in that room and they're not going to work for 24 months. But it's never acceptable often to be, I'm just emotionally in a state where I got to be still. And also, it's important for us to take ownership over our emotional state. There's a lot of omission when we get to that point. This thing is bothering me. I didn't, this person didn't do this for me. I'm having a hard time with this. It's hard to humble yourself and go, I made these decisions. And a lot of times we're only comfortable doing that when it's like an addiction decision. I decided to start using drugs and I developed the sickness of addiction. Where many of us are at points to talk about that. But we're not going to, I kind of just didn't take myself seriously in my 20s. Well, we don't have that conversation, but we need to be able to own that, and sit in that. For those of us that struggle with that, for mothers that were absent with their children, for fathers that were absent with their children, for whatever those things are, us being able to not be condemned to a moment, I think is important in us flourishing, because a lot of people can't deal with the ridicule. They can't deal with the self-ridicule and the ridicule of others. And so they hide in the corners of deficit, and so that's how I've dealt with it, trying to have the courage to step out. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And anyone who tells you that it's fraudulent, it's hard. It's really hard. And pioneers take the spears. You take the first front line of what's going on. I'm grateful for you all having me. I hope it's of some help today, and thank you. I want to say that in some of the folks that I see on the call today in the community that I know that is connected and watching this space, that I feel very blessed and honored to be a part of this community. And I don't know if we always recognize the beauty and how we all as an ecosystem create one another, and I'm reminded of that today, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you very much. Peace.
Thank you, Lyfe.
Thank you so much. Peace and peace. We done.
Oh.
For those of y'all who are still here, you can check out this link. It's in our Eat Online space. We have Decolonization for Dreamers free community if you'd like to join there and check out the handout that ICE will send to us shortly. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And you can get there through our hoodhippieuniverse.com website. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to be with some old friends and a new friend and some family. Yay. What's up next? We have our 12 Steps of Decolonization podcast coming tomorrow. If you would like to join us, you can find that link on the website as well, where we'll be kind of following some of this and talking about how do we be that lake, really. We're on the third step, which is giving over our will to what we have identified as that which is bigger than us, that can help us restore our lives and our sanity. Within colonization and decolonization.
Oh.
Yee.
So how do you get the?
Okay.
What? So when I click on this to visit with ICE's handout, so you have to go to the topics or something, because it just brings us back to the portal to him.
It takes you to the event. Yeah, we'll attach it to the event.
Oh.
And if you're in the paid training and you're watching this, we'll also put it in the paid training where there'll be kind of more steps, kind of a more curriculum experience with processing this as well at some point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Lynn. Good to meet you and have you with us today. Okay. Anything else?
We're good. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, keep coming. Keep coming back.
Keep coming back. It worked. Z, so good to have you here. Love you, sis. Okay. Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful days.
Yeah. So you guys doing the thing tonight?
No.
No.
Oh, you're not.
Tuesday.
Okay. All right. Should we go get water?
Definitely. I'll reach out to you in a second.
Oh. All right. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
I like the background, Amani.
This is the Gungun. These are the ancestors. Spiritual
Uh-huh.
principles.
Yeah. Fancy clothes.
Fancy clothes. Teaching me how to be a lake.
Be the lake. Who's next?
Who's next?